was a protest. They told you it was a video. They lied. 4 Americans are dead. And the people who let it happen, they're still walking free, still smiling on book tours, still cashing checks. I've seen the documents. I've read the memos. And now you're going to hear the story they tried to bury, every piece of it. Benghazi wasn't a fluke. It wasn't chaos. It was planned. Not by the terrorists, but by the people who were supposed to stop them. France started the bombing run in Libya in 2011. But it wasn't about freedom. It was about oil, about money, and about keeping Muammar Gaddafi from creating a gold-backed currency that would destroy French influence in Africa. That didn't sit well with the French president at the time, Nicolas Sarkozy, so he made a deal. Weapons for regime change. A handshake with Washington sealed it. What they didn't tell you is that Gaddafi helped fund Sarkozy's campaign. Millions. That's not just dirty politics. That's a motive. Well, France wanted Gaddafi gone. They needed America to play along. Hillary Clinton, Secretary of State, made it happen. She pushed Obama to intervene. But she didn't act alone. She had help from an old fixer, Sidney Blumenthal. Blumenthal wasn't allowed to work for the government, so he worked around it, off the books, on a private server, paid 10 grand a month through the Clinton Foundation. He wasn't just giving advice, he was setting up business deals in post-Gaddafi Libya. While Americans were risking their lives, Sidney was planning where to put the office furniture. Hillary Clinton used a second private email address, not for personal notes, but for intelligence. She emailed with Blumenthal constantly, ignoring that he had 0 official role. A third of all intel she received on Libya came from him, and all of it off the record. Ambassador Stevens on the ground in Benghazi didn't even have her email address. Think about that. The guy risking his neck in a collapsing hotel can't reach the Secretary of State, but the guy chasing contracts can. Blumenthal's buddies, including a former CIA officer, set up a company, Osprey Global. They weren't just collecting info. They were offering security training and diplomatic services to the new Libyan government. These weren't patriots. These were war profiteers, looking to cash in before the dust settled. Documents from a hacked email show Osprey signing a deal with Libya's Transitional Council. Who leaked that? A Romanian hacker named Guccifer. That's how deep this went. It had to be hacked just to come to light. Stevens wasn't just setting up a consulate. He was there to secure America's place in the new Libya. Quietly. He was operating from a barely functional annex. Crumbling floors, melted ballistic glass, no Marines, no backup, no rapid response team. Because if they sent Marines, it would look like an invasion. And Hillary couldn't have that. Stevens didn't even have direct communication with Clinton. But Blumenthal, he was on speed dial. That tells you everything. Long before the first shot was fired, Stevens knew something was wrong. He sent cables, emails, desperate messages. June 2011, a credible threat forces his team out of a hotel in Benghazi. July 2012, he asks for 13 armed guards, minimum. You'd think that request would get rubber stamped in a heartbeat. Instead, the State Department denied it. They had money for Blumenthal, but not for bodyguards. Right before the attack, Blumenthal sends Hillary another memo. Bombings, kidnappings, foreign diplomats being hunted. That's not background noise. That's a 5-alarm fire. And what did they do with that intel? Nothing. No reinforcements, no contingency, just more silence from the people at the top. September 11th, 2012. 4 Americans are about to be left to die. The outpost is hit hard. Bullets, RPGs, mortars. The guards? Local hires from a company called Blue Mountain Group. Unarmed, untrained, unprepared. They weren't even on duty when the attack began. They ran because they never should have been there in the first place. There was a Marine anti-terror team stationed in Spain. They were ready to launch. But Washington couldn't decide what they should wear. So the Marines changed clothes 4 times, civilian to military, back again, while Americans were bleeding out. All because the White House didn't want to look too aggressive. Imagine that. Image over life. The next day, The spin machine started. Blumenthal sends Clinton a note. It was about a video. The White House grabs that lie like a life preserver. 5 days later, Susan Rice hits 5 news networks with the same story. Protesters spontaneous, some YouTube video no one had ever heard of. They said it wasn't terrorism, even though they already knew it was. Planned, precise, coordinated. The video was a smokescreen, and behind it, a body count. 4 Americans dead. 0 accountability. No one fired, no one prosecuted. Hillary testifies before Congress. Calm, rehearsed, cold. What difference at this point does it make? It makes a difference to the families. It makes a difference to the Marines who never got the call. And it sure as hell makes a difference to the truth. The Clinton Foundation has a pattern. Find a crisis, show up with a camera crew, then rake in the cash while the locals bury their dead. Libya was no different. After the smoke cleared, the plan was to move in with contractors, consultants, reconstruction efforts. All roads led back to the foundation. It wasn't about democracy. It was about deals. Most of this story, the real one, only came out because of a hacker. Not a whistleblower, not a Senate report. A guy named Guccifer. He hacked Blumenthal's inbox. Found messages between him and Clinton detailing Libya, security, post-Gaddafi opportunities. And none of it showed up in the official government record. Because Clinton's team scrubbed the server. They weren't careless. They were careful. Too careful. Chris Stevens was never supposed to be safe. He was bait. Diplomatic cover for something much bigger. Get America a seat at the table. Quietly. Don't rock the boat. Don't show force. That's why there were no Marines. That's why there was no air support. That's why there was no direct line to Clinton. He wasn't just abandoned. He was positioned. And left there. Blue Mountain Group, the joke of a contractor hired to guard the Benghazi compound, never stood trial. They hired locals. One of them had ties to a massive international bribery ring. No experience, no weapons, no loyalty. When it got real, they vanished. And not one person from Blue Mountain was prosecuted, because prosecuting them would lead back to the State Department. And you know whose name is on that door. The quick reaction force, the one that could have saved lives, was grounded. They waited for orders, and those orders never came. They sat, while Americans were burning. Washington stalled, debated uniforms, worried about perception. That's the difference between leadership and politics. And that night, America had the wrong one. When Clinton finally testified, it wasn't about truth. It was about optics. Clean suit. Clean hair, clean lines. But the facts, they stunk. Wiped servers, vanishing emails. No direct contact with her ambassador. Just enough deniability to walk out the front door without cuffs. She wasn't there to answer questions. She was there to run out the clock. Anthony Weiner, former congressman, convicted felon. You wouldn't think he'd matter in a Benghazi case. But his laptop did. It had emails from Huma Abedin, Clinton's top aide. Emails tied to the Libya situation that never showed up in the official count. That laptop and those emails are now in the hands of Donald Trump, Kash Patel, and the FBI. The real investigation hasn't ended. It's just been delayed. Why was a known Clinton advisor running foreign ops without clearance? Why was the ambassador denied security while Blumenthal got paid? Why were emails scrubbed? Not once, but multiple times. Why did Susan Rice lie on 5 networks? Why was nobody held accountable for the deaths of 4 Americans? If any one of us had done a fraction of this, we'd be in a cell. But when your name's Clinton, you get a book deal. This isn't a conspiracy theory. This isn't internet noise. This is what happens when politics infect the chain of command. 4 Americans died. Not because of bad luck, not because of a bad movie, but because they were in the way, forgotten, while others chased power, contracts, and profit. History might forget, but I don't. And now, you won't either. Justice wasn't served in court, so we're serving it here. This is Dirty Harry, and that was Benghazi. If you made it this far, you care about the truth? So do we. But the truth doesn't trend. It gets buried, it gets throttled, it gets shadow banned. We haven't grown in 5 months, not because the content's weak, but because they don't want it seen. So if you want more stories like this, real ones, subscribe, like, comment, share, help us grow, because they sure won't. Dirty Harry, out.